Hello, learners, and welcome to Module 9 of our massive open online course, Education for an Inclusive Society. The title of this module is Inclusive Educational Practices in India. In this module, we will explore several important themes, including the whole school approach in India, government initiatives for promoting an inclusive culture, the role of Sarva Shiksha Abhijan in inclusivity and the challenges faced by SSA in ensuring inclusion. In this first video of Module 9, we will focus on an important concept which is known as the whole school approach in inclusive education. This approach highlights that inclusion is not the responsibility of a single teacher or a single classroom. Rather, it is a shared responsibility of the entire school community, including school leaders, teachers, students, parents, and the wider community. By the end of this session, you will be able to understand the meaning of the whole school approach in inclusive education, identify the key components of a whole school approach, and recognize the benefits and challenges of implementing this approach in Indian schools. Before we discuss what the whole school approach involves, it is important to briefly recall how inclusive education has evolved over time. This has already been discussed in earlier modules. However, for quick revision, let us once again look at the origin of inclusive education. Understanding its global and Indian development helps us to appreciate why a whole school effort is essential for creating truly inclusive learning environments. Origin of inclusive education, a brief overview. As we have learned, the concept of inclusive education has evolved gradually. In the early stages, learners with diverse learning needs were educated in separate or special institutions, which led to segregation. With increasing awareness of human rights and equity, education systems began moving towards integration, where learners with diverse needs were placed in regular schools, however, often with limited support. At the global level, key milestones such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, the UNESCO Salamanca Statement of 1994, and the Sustainable Development Goal 4, 2014 reinforced the idea that education must be inclusive and accessible to all learners. In India, inclusive education progressed through initiatives such as the Integrated Education for Disabled Children (IEDC) program, Sarva Shiksha Abhijan (SSA), and the Right to Education Act 2009, and more recently, the National Education Policy 2020, which strongly promotes inclusive, equitable, and learner-centered education. Together, these developments reflect a clear shift from segregation to inclusion and provide the foundation for approaches such as the whole school approach, which is our topic of discussion in today's session. Policies and international declarations clearly tell us what inclusion should look like. However, the real challenge lies in how schools can put these ideas into practice in a meaningful and sustainable way. This is where the whole school approach becomes extremely important. The whole school approach, often it is called as WSA, is a comprehensive way of thinking about inclusive education. It emphasizes that inclusion is not the responsibility of one teacher, one classroom, or one program. Instead, it is a collective responsibility of the entire school community. This includes school leaders and administrators, teachers and support staff, students, parents and caregivers, and the wider community. In simple words, the whole school approach means that the entire school works together to ensure that all learners, regardless of their backgrounds, abilities, learning styles, language, gender, or socio-economic conditions feel accepted, supported, and valued. For example, inclusion does not only happen when a teacher adjusts a lesson plan. It happens when the school welcomes every learner without discrimination. School rules promote fairness and respect, and students are encouraged to support one another. Thus, the whole school approach focuses on changing the system rather than expecting learners to fit into a rigid structure. Key components of the whole school approach. To understand the whole school approach more clearly, it is helpful to break it down into its main components. These components show us where and how inclusion operates within a school. Broadly, the whole school approach is built on three interrelated pillars. They are first, inclusive culture, second, inclusive policies, and next, inclusive practices. So let us discuss each of these one by one. First, inclusive culture. Inclusive culture forms the foundation of the whole school approach. It refers to the shared beliefs, values, and attitudes within the school. An inclusive culture sends a clear message that every learner belongs. This culture is reflected in the school's vision and mission, everyday interactions, and expectation from both students and staff. For instance, when schools celebrate diversity through assemblies, discussions, or cultural events, they promote respect and understanding among learners. When students are taught empathy and cooperation, inclusion becomes a lived experience rather than just a policy statement. School leadership also plays a vital role in building inclusive culture. Principals and administrators must actively support inclusion by encouraging collaboration, listening to teachers' concern, and ensuring that inclusive values guide decision making. When leaders demonstrate commitment to inclusion, it creates confidence and motivation among teachers and staff to adopt inclusive attitudes. While inclusive culture shapes attitudes and beliefs, it must be supported by clear and practical policies. Without supportive policies, inclusive values often remain only on paper. This brings us to the second component of the whole school approach, that is inclusive policies. Inclusive policies provide a formal framework for implementing inclusion in schools. These policies influence important areas such as admissions, curriculum design, assessment methods, discipline systems, and student support mechanisms. For example, flexible assessment policies allow learners to demonstrate learning in multiple ways through written work, oral responses, projects, or visual presentations. This ensures fairness and reduces unnecessary barriers to learning. Teachers' professional development is another crucial policy area for inclusive education. Inclusive education requires that teachers understand learner diversity and use flexible teaching strategies. Schools must therefore prioritize regular training, workshops, and mentoring programs related to inclusive pedagogy. Supportive policies empower teachers and create an environment where inclusive practices can flourish. So far, we have discussed culture and policies. However, the true test of inclusion lies in what actually happens inside classrooms and school activities. Let us now move to the third and most visible component of the whole school approach, that is inclusive practices. Inclusive practices refer to the day-to-day teaching and learning processes within the school. In inclusive classrooms, teachers use differentiated instructions. This means they modify teaching methods, learning materials, and pace according to learners' needs. For example, a teacher may use visual aids and digital tools, organize group work to encourage peer learning, or provide additional time or support where needed. Inclusive practices also involve collaboration among teachers, counselors, parents, and community organizations. Working together helps school address learners' academic, social, and emotional needs more effectively. Support services such as counseling, remedial teaching, and guidance programs further strengthen inclusion. The whole school approach offers several important benefits for learners, teachers, schools, and the wider community. By addressing inclusion at every level of the school system, this approach helps create meaningful, long lasting change rather than isolated or short term solutions. One of the most significant benefits of the whole school approach is that it improves learning outcomes for all learners, not only those with diverse learning needs. When teaching strategies are flexible and learner centered, students are able to engage with content in ways that suit their abilities, interests, and learning styles. For example, differentiated instruction, use of visual aids, group activities, and digital tools help learners understand concepts more clearly. As a result, learners experience greater academic confidence and improved performance. Importantly, inclusion does not lower standards. Instead, it enhances learning opportunities for everyone. Next is positive and supportive school climate. The whole school approach promotes a positive school climate where respect, cooperation, and empathy are valued. When inclusion becomes part of the school's culture, learners feel safe, accepted, and emotionally supported. Such an environment reduces bullying, discrimination, and social exclusion. Learners develop positive attitudes towards diversity and learn to appreciate individual differences. A supportive school climate also encourages active participation, regular attendance, and stronger engagement in school activities. Inclusive education through a whole school approach also supports the holistic development of learners. It focuses not only on academic achievement but also on social, emotional, moral, and life skills development. Learners gain opportunities to develop communication skills, teamwork, leadership, and problem solving abilities. Through peer interaction and collaborative learning, students learn empathy, responsibility, and mutual respect. These are the skills essential for life beyond school. Another key benefit of the whole school approach is the professional growth of teachers. When schools prioritize inclusion, teachers receive training and support in inclusive pedagogy, classroom management, assessment, and use of assistive and digital technologies. Teachers become more reflective, flexible, and innovative in their teaching practices. Collaboration among teachers also increases, allowing them to share experiences, strategies, and solutions. This not only improves classroom practices but also boosts teachers' confidence and job satisfaction. The whole school approach encourages collaboration among all stakeholders, including teachers, school leaders, parents, counselors, NGOs, and community members. Inclusion becomes a shared responsibility rather than individual effort. Such collaboration helps schools access individual resources, expertise, and support services. Parents feel more involved in their children's education, and community partnerships strengthen the overall support system for learners. This collective effort leads to more effective and sustainable inclusive practices. Next, reduce dropout rates and improve retention. When learners feel valued, supported, and understood, they are more likely to stay in school. The whole school approach helps reduce dropout rates by addressing learning difficulties, emotional concerns, and social barriers early. Support mechanisms such as counseling, remedial teaching, mentoring, and flexible assessment help learners overcome challenges and continue their education. Improved retention contributes to better educational outcomes and social equity. Next, the whole school approach aligns closely with national and international commitments to inclusive education. In India, it supports the vision of the National Education Policy 2020, which emphasizes equity, inclusion, learner-centered education, and school-level flexibility. At the global level, this approach contributes to achieving Sustainable Development Goal 4, which aims to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all. By adopting a whole school approach, schools move closer to fulfilling these policy goals in practice. Finally, the whole school approach has a long term impact beyond the school environment. Learners educated in inclusive settings grow into socially responsible citizens who value diversity and inclusion. Such individuals are more likely to contribute positively to society, promote equality, and challenge discriminatory attitudes. In this way, inclusive schools play a crucial role in building a more just, equitable, and inclusive society. While the whole school approach offers many benefits, implementing it in real school settings is not always easy. Schools often face several practical, structural, and attitudinal challenges. Understanding these challenges is important so that realistic and effective solutions can be developed. So, let us now discuss some of the major challenges faced by Indian schools in adopting the whole school approach, along with possible ways to address them. First is resistance to change and attitudinal barriers. One of the most common challenges is resistance to change. Inclusion requires a shift in mindset from viewing diversity as a problem to recognizing it as a strength. Some teachers, parents, or even school leaders may feel that inclusive education increases workload or affects academic standards. For example, teachers may feel unprepared to handle diverse learning needs, while parents may also worry that inclusion will slow down classroom instruction for their students, for their children. This challenge can be addressed through awareness programs, regular sensitization workshops, and open communication. When stakeholders understand the values and benefits of inclusion, resistance gradually reduces. Strong leadership plays a key role in creating a shared vision and encouraging positive attitudes towards inclusive practices. Next is limited teacher preparation and professional support. Many teachers have not received adequate training in inclusive education during their pre-service or in-service programs. As a result, they may lack confidence in using inclusive teaching practices, adapting curricula, or supporting learners with diverse needs. Without proper guidance, teachers may feel overwhelmed and unsure about how to implement inclusion effectively in the real classroom situation. So, for this, continuous professional development is essential. Schools should organize regular training program on inclusive pedagogy, differentiated instruction, classroom management, and use of ICT and assistive tools. Peer mentoring and collaborative teaching practices can also help teachers learn from one another. Another major challenge is the lack of adequate resources. Many schools face shortages of assistive devices, accessible learning materials, trained support staff, and inclusive infrastructure like ramps, accessible toilets, or digital learning tools. Such limitations make it difficult to fully implement a whole school approach, especially in rural or under resourced areas. For this, schools can work closely with government agencies, NGOs, and local communities to mobilize resources. Proper planning, prioritization of needs, and effective utilization of available funds can also improve resource management. Government initiatives under programs like Sarva Shiksha, which is now known as Samaka Shiksha, plays an important role in addressing these gaps. Next, rigid curriculum and assessment practices. So, traditional curricula and examination systems often focus on uniform learning outcomes and standardized assessments. This rigidity makes it difficult to accommodate diverse learning styles, abilities, and paces. So, for instance, learners who need alternative mode of expression may struggle in conventional written examinations. Curriculum flexibility and inclusive assessment practices are key to overcoming this challenge. Schools should adopt varied teaching methods and assessment tools such as projects, oral presentations, portfolios, and continuous assessment. This aligns with NAP 2020, which encourages competency-based and learner-centered assessment practices. Next, weak collaboration among stakeholders. In some schools, inclusion is seen as the responsibility of special educators or counselors alone. So, limited collaboration among teachers, parents, administrators, and external agencies weaken the effectiveness of inclusive practices. Without shared responsibility, support system remains fragmented and inconsistent. The whole school approach emphasizes teamwork and collaboration. Regular meetings, parent engagement programs, and partnerships with health professionals, therapists, and community organizations help to build a strong support network for learners. Clear communication channels ensure that everyone works towards common inclusive goals. Next is monitoring and sustainability issues. Even when inclusive practices are introduced, sustaining them over time can be challenging. Lack of monitoring, evaluation, and follow-up often results in inconsistent implementation. Schools may struggle to measure progress or identify areas that need improvement. So, regular monitoring and evaluation mechanisms should be built into school planning. Feedback from teachers, learners, and parents helps assess the effectiveness of inclusive strategies. Data-based decision-making ensures continuous improvement and long-term sustainability. Thus, although the implementation of the whole school approach presents several challenges, these challenges are not impossible to overcome. With committed leadership, continuous teacher training, collaborative efforts among stakeholders, and supportive policies, schools can gradually move towards creating inclusive and equitable learning environments for all learners. So, with this, we have reached the end of today's session. In this session, we discussed the concept of inclusive education and briefly revisited its global and Indian origins to understand how the idea of inclusion has evolved over time. We then focused on the whole school approach, which emphasizes that inclusion is a shared responsibility of the entire school community. We examined the meaning and key components of the whole school approach, including inclusive culture, inclusive policies, and inclusive practices. We also discussed the benefits of adopting this approach, such as improved student outcomes, a positive school climate, and stronger community engagement. Finally, we explored the challenges involved in implementing the whole school approach in Indian schools and the possible strategies to address these challenges. This session highlights that meaningful inclusion cannot be achieved through isolated efforts. Instead, it requires a coordinated school-wide commitment to equity, participation, and respect for learner diversity. In the next session, we will move forward to understand the government initiatives in India that promotes an inclusive culture in education. Thank you.